I can hear you. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you for joining us. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the North Carolina ABLE Program Board of Trustees meeting of November 8th at 9:30 a.m. I'll now call this meeting to order. In a moment, I'll ask you to join us in our Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to the North Carolina flag. If you wish to make a public comment, please email Lisa Norris at nctreasurer.com. Our meeting, for transparency purposes, is being recorded. The meeting, as well as all board materials, are posted online. When taking a vote, we will do a roll call by name. And without objection, anybody who makes a motion or second to a motion for efficiency purposes will be considered a yes vote. Board members, if you leave the meeting at any time, please announce your departure as well as your return. And these meetings must be recorded in our meeting minutes. Likewise, if you have a question or comment, please state your name for the minutes. And finally, very importantly, any text or other communications between board members during the meeting, even on personal phones, are considered public record to the extent that they concern the meeting. As a final reminder, please mute your phone until you need to speak. This will limit our background noise. And I'd like to dedicate our proceedings today in honor of Dr. Linda Combs, who was laid to rest 3 weeks ago. We've had 75 governors, 28 treasurers in North Carolina, but only 8 controllers. She was controller number 7, the first female controller in the history of North Carolina. She also served under 3 different presidents as the chief fiscal officer for the United States of America, who we desperately need. And through all of her confirmation processes through the United States Congress as well as North Carolina General Assembly, she never received a no vote. So she was a fantastic public servant, and we will conduct our proceedings today in her honor and pray for her family. With that, please join and we'll have our pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the Old North State love, loyalty, and faith. With that, we have an Ethics Act. Please be aware of our conflicts or potential conflicts of interest. Members, you've seen our agendas. Does anyone have a conflict or potential conflict of interest regarding any matters that are before us? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of May 10th. I need to call the roll. Oh, excuse me. Please call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell,
Here.
Tim Smith,
Here.
Melinda Plew,
I'm here.
Kenneth Bozell on behalf of Chris Egan,
Present.
Marquita Robertson, and Joyce Jarrett on behalf of Catherine Boskin.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of May 10th.
This is Melinda. So moved.
Thank you, Melinda. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you. You too.
Second.
Tim Smith, second.
Thank you, Tim. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell,
Here.
Kenneth
Aye.
Bozell on behalf of Chris Egan,
Yes, aye.
and Joyce Jarrett on behalf of Catherine Boskin.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Now we're to Jeff Hancock, our director, for our administrative update.
Great, thank you. We wanted to present to you the budget we have for the first year of the biennium, which is the 23-24 year. You can see from the budget submitted, the budget is $209,074. This is the same exact appropriation that we had for the prior biennium. So nothing's changed there. Moving on to the revenue assumptions for the program. The NC Able program does receive an administrative fee of $5 per account. And we project that to be about $10,000 for the year, as our accounts at 6:30 were about 2,000 accounts. This is an increase of about $2,300, and again, based on the increase in accounts from last year. In terms of our expenditures, they largely remain the same. The only difference you'll see here is we did increase the reimbursement to the supplemental retirement plans for their services that they render to the ABLE program. As you are all aware, we do not have any full-time headcount aligned to the program, so we borrow staff time from another unit to perform services. And so what we did was we reduced the part-time outreach person we had. We reduced that by $25,000. We increased one of our staff members' time up from 5% to 20% to help with some of the outreach program stuff that we were trying to get done. And that results in an increase in the reimbursement of about $21,000. All other expenditure categories are expected to remain the same, and you can see that the estimated annual payment to reimburse the retirement systems division is about $120,000. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions about the NC Able program budget for the 23-24 year.
Any questions? Does that need to be a motion?
It does not.
Thank you.
The last thing I wanted just to make sure you're all aware of, there was a bill that passed the House. It was House Bill 131. It's now in the Senate. It's Senate Bill 692. And if it does pass the Senate, what this will do is it will protect NC Able accounts, the monies in those accounts and monies withdrawn from those accounts that are used for their intended purposes. It will exempt them from assignment, judgment, or garnishment. So we think that's a very positive step in terms of this legislation to help protect these types of investment accounts from that. So again, the bill has passed the House. The bill is now in the Senate. And we see that this is consistent with some of the statutes in other states like South Carolina and Tennessee. So again, I'm looking forward to that. We think this will be a very good thing for these types of accounts. Any questions about the bill that I just mentioned and the status thereof?
Hey, Jeff, it's Melinda. So just so I can be clear, can you give me just a little bit more of an understanding of what is protected? You said garnishments. What does that tell me how that really plays out for a family so we can explain it well?
So yeah, I could barely hear you, Melinda, but I think you
Oh,
were
sorry.
asking for a little bit more detail on that.
Correct. Yes.
And so basically, if this does pass, then any monies that are in an ABLE account, or if they're withdrawn from the account and used for the expenses permitted under Section 529A, then those funds shall not be subject to liens, attachments, garnishments, levy, seizure, or any kind of involuntary sale or assignment. So again, it kind of protects these funds against the enforcement of any kind of judgment or claim of debt.
Okay. Not Medicaid payback upon death. Is that correct?
That is correct. Medicaid payback is not part of this.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Go ahead.
I'm done all for my update, and now we can go to Zora.
Zora, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am going to give a high-level overview of our communication and outreach efforts over the past few quarters. So when looking at Q2 and Q3, we have been really busy pushing awareness through our various sponsorships, ongoing events, and with our social media channels. And what's been really great is this has allowed us to expand the scope of our audience, not only to potential account holders and their families, but also to groups like caregivers, social workers, financial planners, as well as special education professionals. And when you look at Q2 and Q3, we participated in 19 different events and webinars and provided material to several other conferences throughout the state. One other thing I want to mention, as you may recall, last year we kicked off our own NCABLE webinar series, and this really continues to grow in popularity and participation. So over this time span, we've actually seen 157 different registrants for that monthly webinar. And Treasurer, I want to extend a huge thank you to you for your ongoing help in promoting the program. Because of your efforts, we've garnered some impactful media coverage with the Special Olympics of North Carolina. We had a feature article in Spectrum magazine, and there was also an appearance on the Jackson Roble Show. The next slide, Patty. When you take a look at our digital assets, our website, ncable.org, really continues to grow as a resource. And we've added things like timely blog posts, as well as an on-demand webinar that really help our members be the best account holders they can be. And our strategic efforts with the website are working. So people are not only visiting the website and looking at the resources we have available, but they're taking action. They're doing things like downloading our enrollment checklist. They're going to our upcoming events page and actually registering for events. And they're actually also viewing our on-demand webinar. And in fact, when you look at Q2 and Q3, we've seen an 18.7% month over month increase in users to our website, which is really, really great to see. And this ultimately supports the growth that we've also seen in opened NCABLE accounts and assets. And at the close of Q3, we saw over 2,100 NCABLE accounts and over $21.7 million in assets. Next slide, please, Patty. So social media continues to support all of our efforts, and we're seeing an ongoing growth in the amount of followers and engagement across our platforms. And while we are seeing growth, we want to foster more engagement, and we're doing that through specific campaigns, working with our different partners to promote our channels, and directly showing our channels on our website, during our webinar, and at different events that we are at. Now, looking forward to 2024, we will continue our organic growth of the program with purpose through several key initiatives. So first, we are going to continue our monthly NCABLE webinar series. But we are going to customize and really streamline the content so that we're really giving a unique experience for potential account holders, their families, and the different professional groups that tune in. In fact, when we look at Q4, we already have participated in and or have scheduled 12 12 different events and webinars, and that's in Q4 alone. So that's really great to see. We are also launching a pilot program with the Wake Forest Park and Rec Department's Specialized and Inclusion Program. And really our goal here is to take this initiative and expand it to other parks and rec departments across the state. And then lastly, we will continue to maximize any opportunities we can with the treasurer and with the media to really raise awareness of the benefits that NC Able provides. So I know that was quite a bit of information given. I'm going to stop here and turn it over to you all to see if there's any questions for me today.
Okay. Any questions for Zora?
I would like to add, and just really a big thanks to staff. As Zora mentioned, Q4 has been extremely busy for us. We've have had a number of events where we've had to divide and conquer. Kristen staffed the Assistive Technology Expo, as well as the Miracle League of the Triangle. Zora did the autism walk in the pouring down rain. She said that that Able needs to buy her an umbrella in order to stay dry during these events. But again, and Christy did the NC State Fair for her. So again, just a lot of events. And just want to thank staff for all of their efforts in getting out and meeting with the public and promoting the program. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Zora. Now we're on to the program manager administrative update. Jose, Molly, and Paul from Ascensus.
Hello, good morning. Can you folks hear me?
We can, but if you could be a little bit louder, it'd be great.
Perfect. Let me try this. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is that better? Excellent.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Good morning. Excellent. Good morning, Treasurer Falwell, esteemed board members, and NC Able team. We really appreciate the opportunity to present in front of the board this morning. My name is Jose Rafael Gamboa. I am the relationship manager for the NC Able program. I'm joined by Derek Thompson, who is our Able product manager, Molly Peterson, senior client relationship administrator, and also our partner, Dan Beck. He's a vice president of product lines at Fifth Third Bank. So Derek Thompson's going to kick us off and provide a brief update in regards to the work that we all have collaboratively been working on to develop and essentially launch our enrollment flows, we'll call it, or account types. In addition, the work around entity online enrollment, and then finally provide a little bit more context and background around the most recent activity and really remediation steps we took around the fraud that we've experienced. And Dan Beck will also provide kind of, the fraud timeline and additional context around that. And then we'll wrap it up with Paul Supe, who will provide an investment overview. So I will now hand it on to Derek. Derek, please.
Thanks for the introduction, Jose. Hi, folks. Happy to be here. Thanks for having us. As Jose mentioned, there are a number of initiatives which the product team has worked on. Actually, can you hear me? Can folks hear me okay?
Yes, there we can.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, the updates that we're making here that we've been working on and been updating are around the account type enrollment updates. So what those updates have done for us has been able to improve the language in which we're communicating to the end users on the web enrollments, online enrollments. And so we made a number of updates to 3 of the 4 account types, as you can see on the slide. And we're undergoing one of the account type updates currently, which we are making a high priority to get that update pushed out to end users. And then we're also undergoing a lot of work on entity online enrollment. So what this will do is allow us to add organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, etc., to be able to create ABLE accounts. Instead of a one-to-one relationship, we'll be able to have many ABLE accounts added underneath that organization. And the last fraud-related item that Jose mentioned was our debit card optional with the checking account. So the current process is that the checking account will send out a debit card to every user. And we're making that optional to the users with the help of Fifth Third's engagement, so that any user that doesn't have a need for a debit card can choose to not receive one. So that rounds out our product updates. If there's any questions or comments, don't hesitate to raise those.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much, Derek. And appreciate that update. And again, I'd be remiss not to thank and express our gratitude to the NC ABLE team, who have been active participants with the working group in helping us develop and finalize the content around the enrollments, building out online entity enrollment and scoping that work out. So we at a minimum, we meet weekly as a group. On occasion, sometimes that cadence can increase to twice a week. So we absolutely appreciate the NC ABLE team and their level of dedication, expertise, and commitment. So very, very much appreciated. And what we'll do is now we'll pass it on to Dan Beck, and he'll provide kind of, a little of the timeline and a little bit more details around the recent fraud events that we've experienced. Dan?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jose. I want to make sure everybody can hear me first of all.
Yes, we can, clearly. Thank you.
Great. I appreciate it. Well, it's great to be with you this morning, and again, appreciate North Carolina and its commitment to the program, obviously, as we've seen over the last slide. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about a recent fraud event that we had. You can kind of think of this one as indicative of, we've had a couple of these throughout 2023. So I want to talk about this one in particular, but you can kind of use this as basically a model for how these have appeared in the past, and then more importantly, going forward, what plans we have in place. So in this case, we had an online service provider called Discord, and we noted that as these attacks tend to happen, they happen over a couple-day period, where we see a strong escalation in the number of transactions, in this case from Discord. So we saw that beginning at on the 28th of July. And saw it kind of, if you kind of plot these out, they'll do a few on one time in different batches, and then there's usually one day where they hit really big, and then we take action, right? So on the 1st of August, we basically deployed a rule that said we're going to decline all of these transactions, in which case activity fully ceased. So we saw that while other transactions from Discord were hitting, we were declining all of them in order to protect the portfolio. So this was a pretty big attack. So we had over 2,500 ABLE cards that were impacted with a little less than 3,000 transactions. 128 of those specifically were in the North Carolina plan. So once we were able to kind of, basically knew that we had this attack and knew what the population was and that we had basically stopped it, we immediately moved to issue refunds to impacted customers. It says these are in process. We had them all out by the end of the month, and they were applied by our partners at Ascensus. And so this specific attack was not isolated to the ABLE portfolio at Fifth Third. So we saw other debit portfolios that were impacted, as well as in talking to our partners at MasterCard and WorldPay and others. This was kind of across the industry. So we had a number of banks that were attacked kind of simultaneously with Discord. Again, this was one of the bigger attacks that we've seen. Let me pause right there, and I'm going to go into a little bit more background about these attacks in general, but let me just pause and make sure there aren't any questions on the timeline or the remediation situation. Okay.
Board members, are there any questions at this point? All right, Dan, continue.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. So we've seen these attacks a few times, particularly into the Able portfolio. So the way that these happen, as we've learned more and more with kind of every one of these, particularly as they've escalated, is that certain online merchants in particular use what's called a card on file or card not present transaction type. So in this case, I think many of you are probably familiar with this. It's very similar to what major retailers like Target or Amazon will use in the online space, where I don't have a customer in front of me with a card. Instead, they might have saved it into a profile or something like that. In these particular transactions, they use a particular type of transaction for card on file that actually doesn't require additional verification. So I don't need to match the address or the CVV, which is kind of the 3-digit number on the back of the card. So in this case, really all they need is a card number and an expiration date. So what these basically what the fraudsters do is they have a bot they will build that will spin through card number and expiration date combinations until they get a hit, and then they'll kind of change their algorithm to focus in on that bin number. So if you think about it, it's like the first 8 numbers on a card, and just randomly spin through those until it gets hit, until they get a hit. Typically, they will do them for small dollar transactions. So in this case, it was less than $10 and $9.99, because those are much more likely to go through in this case without additional verification. So higher dollar amounts will almost always ask for additional verification. So as I mentioned, this has really become a fraud vector for the bot attacks. They're called brute force enumeration attack. So in this case, it's not Discord themselves that are doing this, but a fraudster mimicking those transactions and being able to kind of attack the accounts. So as I mentioned, in these cases, the information isn't compromised. The card number and expiration date has kind of been guessed at randomly, but it still allows it to go through, especially at these lower dollar amounts. So these are ones that are kind of insidious because similar to what we've seen before with Spotify and Paramount and some others, they mimic real transactions that users might actually use. So it's kind of hard to detect them because they mimic real transactions until you realize the volume of these is just way more than we're seeing on a normal basis, and that's how we catch them. So given that, we have put in a number of proactive strategies, particularly into the Able portfolio, that allows us to basically stop these attacks before they start. So the customer experience, if you will, I think many of you might be familiar with this, that you might get a text or a call saying, "Hey, this is Fifth Third Bank. Did you we have a transaction for $9.99 for Discord earlier today. Did you make this? Select yes or no." In some cases, they might get a phone call asking to authorize the transaction. So that's basically how the customer experience works when we really clamp down in terms of our strategies around this fraud. So again, let me pause there before I move on. See if there are any questions around this.
Any questions? Hearing none, proceed.
Sure. We could go to the next page. Next page on the presentation. Thank you. So again, talking about the card not present, this is an industry-wide problem. On the right-hand side, you can see a graph that shows payment fraud losses kind of across the industry. So the card not present payments are in red. So those are the ones that continue to escalate and are forecasted to escalate into 2024. Again, Fifth Third stands behind a zero liability promise on unauthorized transactions if they're reported, or in this case, if we identified a group of them, we will refund those transactions, no questions asked. In some cases, we'll mount an investigation, but typically in these bot attacks, they're pretty widespread. So we just we don't need to do a whole lot of investigating there. And so one of the things that we've done into the Able portfolio is basically say for these types of transactions, which are card on file without additional verification, we've just declined them across the board. It's something we might not do in our larger consumer portfolio, although that is under discussion, just because of the amount of kind of customer noise that can be involved. But with Able, we have a relatively small portfolio that we can manage much better. And obviously, we're working with MasterCard and our processing partners to introduce more aggressive strategies to minimize this type of fraud attack. In fact, MasterCard, we were on a call with them last week, and MasterCard has basically said to their vendors, we're not going to accept these types of these types of transactions anymore without additional verification. And if you continue to do that, MasterCard has been fining some some players, particularly in the online space, as they continue to have fraud events because they're using that type of transaction. So again, let me pause here and see if there are any other questions. One thing I might add is that, going around the debit card space, just in general, as Derek mentioned, we are working with the census to provide an opt-in or out at origination. And as well, if someone opts out at origination, so they open their Able account, they say, I don't think I'm going to need a debit card. They can always add one later simply by calling Fifth Third and saying, I'd like to get a debit card, and we'll issue one to them immediately. In addition, we are upgrading our debit card platform in 2024, which will, coming out of that, there'll be some additional functionality around fraud mitigation. So one is actually which is happening before that, is a new debit card tracker. So we kind of call it amongst ourselves the pizza tracker. So this will tell you if you have opened an account that, hey, your debit card has been processed, it's been put in the mail, and you should have received it, right? So you can kind of track the progress of your debit card arriving over the 7 to 10 business days, which I think is a really good fraud mitigant. As we move to the upgraded platform again in 2024, there'll be improved back-end monitoring and other kind of fraud prevention strategies that kind of happen in the background. And then additionally, there'll be what I call customer controlled debit card on-off. So if you know that, if you're not a very big debit user, but you do use it occasionally, you can go in through the app or through online and be able to shut your debit card off, so it cannot be used until you then turn it back on to go use it, either at the store or online or wherever you choose. So I think that there are, a number of things that we are working on in addition to our ongoing monitoring and fraud strategies kind of behind the scenes that our team works on. And Jeff, I know you were part of our due diligence meeting 2 weeks ago, where we talked a little bit more about that with the team.
Yes. Thank you, Dan, and thank you for presenting this to the board. I just wanted you guys to be aware, because this, while it's not an NC Able problem, and it is an industry-wide problem, it did and can affect our accounts. And so just wanted you guys to be apprised of, what took place and the steps that Fifth Third has taken to mitigate that and to protect our NC Able account owners. So again, thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Great.
We're now.
Thank you so much, Dan. Oh, forgive me. I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
Shall I proceed? Excellent. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Jeff. And before we pass it on to Molly Peterson, Senior Client Relationship and Administrator, she's going to provide NC Able specific account information, the data that we've seen on the last several months or so. But another major milestone that we neglected to highlight as part of our product accomplishments was the launch of the New Hampshire Able plan, which ultimately that grows the Alliance membership from 18 to now 19 members. Just to give a little bit more context and background there, the New Hampshire Able plan was originally part of the Stable Consortium, So they, they went through, I believe, a year or two of annual, forgive me, due diligence and kind of research, and ultimately came to the conclusion that they should join the alliance. So at the end of October, we launched the New Hampshire ABLE Plan, really in collaboration with the New Hampshire State Treasurer, Treasurer Mezzapelli, along with the New Hampshire's Governor's Commission on Disability. So remarkable. Once again, the alliance continues to grow, and we're super proud of it. Any questions?
No questions, proceed.
Wonderful. Excellent. Wonderful. Molly Peterson, please.
Thank you. Again, my name is Molly Peterson. I'm going to go ahead and present some of those program performance metrics as Jose mentioned. Since our last meeting a few weeks ago, the NC ABLE Plan assets have risen by around 7%. As you see here, around 4% of that growth actually took place between May and June. We suspect some of that's led by some of the account growth due to several of the different engagement efforts that Zora showed us earlier, as well as some of the interest and engagement by a few of the disability organizations within the state. Then moving on to the next slide, we're going to take a look at the North Carolina ABLE contributions by month. Again, in May and June, we did see a slight increase in contributions as well. That meets those asset and account growth metrics that we saw there. Again, I believe a few of those engagement efforts have really been growing the plan, have been impacting new contributions into the program as well. As these accounts are being opened, they're immediately contributing to their accounts and engaging with their accounts. With some larger deposits than what we've seen. And that continues to be a trend that we see across the alliance as well. You can move to the next slide. Electronic payments continue to make up nearly half of all contribution transactions so far this year, followed by checks and then recurring contributions. I wanted to take a note that if we compare this data to the state slide from a year ago, most of the participant behavior still remains the same, but I did want to note that accounts have received around 30% more, or about $50,000 more in gifts this year in comparison to last year. That's shown here as the UGIF contribution type. And then another growth here has been in the payroll category. That's increased this year by over 41%, and that equates to around $80,000. Taking a look at these contributions by age group slide, did want to let you know that I did amend this a little bit since the last time you saw this. I kind of brought some of these age group brackets into 10-year groupings to give you a better picture of some of those user age demographics amongst the North Carolina ABLE participants. Then moving on to distribution activity, I haven't really noted any significant changes in user activity here as well. The distribution activity since our last meeting seems to be driven by the standard activity around the transactional nature of the checking account option. And that's also shown by the next slide as we note into the distributions by type. That checking account option for the withdrawal event category is continually where we find the largest dollar amount of North Carolina ABLE distributions. Then the next categories we see are the account owner and third parties taking their standardized distributions as well. I did take a comparison. I did compare this to the slide from last year, and the behavior still remained around the same, which is a big indication to me that tells us that the savers are continuing to use the North Carolina ABLE program to meet their ongoing needs. Next is the distributions by age group. Again, this slide gives you a better picture of the user age demographics. When you actually compare this to the contribution slide, it's going to give us a really great indication of what ages are saving versus spending more as well. So it's a good engagement tool if you need that for some of the campaigns or information that you need. Moving on into the new accounts by month, you'll note that, again, we do see that jump in accounts that we mentioned previously in around May. Overall, the North Carolina ABLE Plan has seen about a 23% growth in accounts since this time last year. Again, I suspect a lot of this activity is being driven by more individual and organizations becoming engaged with the plan through some of the communication and awareness efforts that Zora and team have been shared with us. And then moving on into the next two slides, again, these are more plan demographic slides. They give us a breakdown of accounts and assets by those disability types and then eligibility types within the program. And then moving on, we also have the account closures here. There isn't any significant change in comparison to activity last year. Inactive accounts are continuously kind of one of the more larger drivers of account closures. This does take place if we don't, of course, receive funding or the legal documents in a timely manner, but also if accounts within the checking option are being charged down, those can close as well. I did actually take a look into some of that activity a little more and suspect since around a quarter of those North Carolina ABLE users use the checking account option, and that option seems to be more of a transactional user trend. What tends to happen is that the accounts get charged down and closed, but the vast majority of them reopen after the user either refunds the accounts with a one-time payment or once we receive those automatic recurring payments back in the following month. And then the last slide I will be showing is that Alliance asset ranking slide. Again, by the time we come back next, during our next meeting, we will have another plan, as Jose mentioned, added to this slide. But kudos to the North Carolina ABLE team. They're holding pretty strong here with the 6th slot amongst the ABLE Alliance members. And that's all I had to present today. If there aren't any questions, I can pass our presentation off to Paul, who's going to be giving us the fund and performance metrics.
Okay. Any questions for Molly? Okay, hearing none. Paul, if you can proceed.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us join you today. We will start the investment section just looking at the asset allocation plan growth as of the end of the third quarter of 2023. Despite the negative markets we experienced in the third quarter, the NC ABLE plan still managed to grow assets quarter over quarter by about 400,000, which is about 1.9% growth. Year over year, this growth has been a little bit stronger. Assets grew by about 5.8 million, which is growth about 36.8%. So this is slightly behind the growth rates of the National ABLE Alliance as a whole, who had growth rates of about 3.4% and 38.2% altogether. That's kind of discounting the effect of the Colorado plan having been in the plan a year ago and not in it anymore. But taking out that effect, that's what the growth rates are. Switching to performance on this page, we have, as after the fourth quarter of 2022 and the first 2 quarters of 2023, had produced really strong returns in equities. The market took a pause from its rally this past quarter. So food and energy prices caused the consumer price index to increase each month of the third quarter. while still well below the inflation rate that we had last year, this trend reversal really caused the growth stocks that had been kind of really moving those equity markets to pull back from those 2023 highs. As interest rates rose, especially longer duration bonds, the spreads tightened between bonds. This caused negative returns in the bond market. In having for our portfolios, we have a duration tilt towards kind of lower duration for bonds, and that's helped the position in these portfolios, especially the more conservative portfolios, control their losses or so, have smaller negative returns. Even with the negative market performance over the last quarter in both equities and bonds, year-to-date performance has remained strong. And over the past year, we can even see double-digit returns in the higher equity portfolios. Switching to the next slide, we have the underlying funds. So this first slide is the equity underlying funds. The top two funds here, the Vanguard Institutional Index and the Vanguard Extended Index, represent that U.S. Equity market. So both had a negative return of about 3.3% for the quarter, but both have performed very well over the 1 year, with large cap funds really outperforming small and mid cap funds, and that's been the trend over the last few years really. On the international equity side, we had about a negative 3.9% return for the quarter, with emerging markets outperforming the developed markets. That is kind of a little bit of a reversal of what we've seen over the last couple of years, where developed markets have kind of really outperformed, and they had outperformed quite a bit in the last 3 quarters prior to this one. What we saw here is twofold, because they had so much growth in those prior 3 quarters. With a pullback, there's a little bit bigger pullback from those larger returns. So you had emerging markets really kind of outperforming there. The second part of the outperformance for emerging markets was China. They really made some policy changes. Their central bank started to lower rates, and they opened up kind of policies for their real estate market, which had been one of the biggest detractors during the pandemic or so. So those two kind of loosening of policies kind of really helped China, which is about 35% of the emerging markets. So that in turn helped emerging markets. Lastly, the real estate sector, being as sensitive as it is to kind of rise in interest rates, was hurt in the third quarter. Real estate really has been one of the hardest hit sectors over the past year and a half or so, when interest rates have been rising. But we see a peak to these kind of interest rate hikes happening within early to mid 2024, and after that we could see kind of decreasing rates and decreasing interest rates, and that could be, real estate could be one of those sectors that benefit the most. And the last page I have here is the underlying funds for the fixed income side. So, of course, we added the high yield exposure to the aggressive and moderately aggressive options in May. And since that point, it has been one of the stronger performing sectors of the fixed income allocation. Along with high yield bonds, short-term bonds, and short-term inflation protected bonds, those three underlying funds were able to produce positive returns for the quarter, and have been really the best contributors to performance in the fixed income allocation since they were added to the target risk option. So for that high yield, it's only been about 5 months, but for the other 2 positions, it's really been almost 7 years that they have been in the portfolio. While our international bonds did have a small negative return for the quarter, it has helped to diversify our portfolio and outperform that total U.S. bond market position. While some international bonds have been affected by the strengthening dollar, the fund we use in these portfolios has a currency hedge to it. So even though the U.S. dollar has kind of strengthened, that usually has an effect on kind of international bond funds and international equity funds, because we have that hedge on this bond fund. We don't have that risk within this underlying fund or within these portfolios. So overall, the diversification of the fixed income section to kind of shorter duration bonds, inflation protected bonds, international bonds, they've all had kind of a positive effect on these portfolios over the last 7 years. And each has kind of really outperformed that U.S. total bond position. Any questions on any of the underlying or the plan level performance?
Any questions? No questions.
Okay, I'll throw it back to Jose.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. And that concludes the presentation by the Ascensus team members and Dan at Fifth Third. Are there any questions for me?
Hearing no questions, Jose, thank you, and Molly, Paul, and Dan for your presentations. With that,
You're
we'll
welcome.
go to
Thank you.
public comment. Anyone sign up? No one signed up for public comment, so I hereby deem public comment section to be closed. Our announcements are May 9th, our 2 board meetings next year, May 9th and November 7th, 2024. And we appreciate all the participation here today. Thank you for all you're doing to help us organically grow the ABLE program in North Carolina. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. It's Melinda.
Thank you, Melinda.
Second, Tim Smith.
Thank you, Tim. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none. If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell,
Aye.
Kenneth Buzzell on behalf of Chris Egan,
Aye.
and Joyce Jarrett on behalf of Catherine Moskin.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. Wish everybody happy holidays, traveling mercies, and we're hereby adjourned.